On today's episode, you're going to meet somebody very special. Now, she's not a celebrity or a social media person, but she will give you so much information that is so helpful. Her name is Lesley Bogad, and she's a single mother by choice. And she decided to have her child in a way that really works for her. She has come up with this amazing paradigm for how to approach single motherhood, how to approach having a donor conceived child, and how to just approach life. She's so interesting and has so many valuable lessons to teach us. So pull up a chair and get comfortable because I think you're really going to like this episode. Welcome to Building Your Family. This podcast is about surrogacy, donor conception, and all the ways the modern family is built. I'm your host. My name is Lisa Schumann. I'm an author, a therapist, and I am passionate about helping people have a better journey to parenthood and a greater parenting experience. And here we are going to talk about both of those things today with Lesley Bogad, who's a wonderful person and a dear friend, and she is going to tell us about so many things that I think a lot of people are really interested in hearing about. She is a professor, and so she also has some historical and intellectual knowledge about all the things she talks about, but she's also a single mother by choice. And her son, we talk about single parents by choice and having children at different ages. And her son, who's 12, knows all about his story and has known about his story from a very early age. And she will take you on our journey through this process and help you understand some of the things that have been beneficial for her so you can help your family to be. So welcome, Lesley. Thank you so much for coming today. Really appreciate having you here.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm so happy to get to be here and tell my story.
So why don't we start there? Tell me a little bit about your background, and if you could tell the viewers a little bit about how you decided to become a single mother by choice.
So I was married and in a relationship for about 15 years, from the time I was probably 16 until my early 30s, until I was 32, 33. And when I got divorced, I was at a place where I was very ready to have a baby. We were at that point in our relationship, in our lives together, where we were starting to talk about having a baby, and then everything started to unravel. And so when I got divorced, a very amicable divorce filled with love and generosity, but also really sad and really unsettling, not only because you're unraveling a life with someone that you've loved and had this world with, but also because I was ready to have a baby. And all of a sudden I was 32 and by myself. And so I spent most of my 30s actually dating. Lovely men, really amazing, wonderful men who I dated for about 3 months each, and then would decide I didn't want to have a baby with them. And I would quickly kind of exit. And I'm friends with most of them. They still are a part of my life, but I knew I didn't want to raise a family with them. And my best friend works in fertility. And she, from the minute I got divorced, was on me. She was like, you need to come freeze your eggs. You need to freeze your eggs. You need to freeze your eggs. And I was like, no, I'm not ready. No, I'm not ready. No, I'm not ready. And then there was a point in time, actually, for me, it was a very distinct moment when I was at a family holiday. We were at a Passover Seder, and I'm the oldest of my generation. And my cousin, who is kind of 2 notches down on the ladder, he and his wife announced at Seder that they were pregnant. And that would be the first of the next generation. And I got up from the table and I went into the bathroom and I texted my best friend and I said, Erin and Melissa are pregnant. I'm going to have a baby. I'll call you tomorrow.
Wow.
So it was truly a moment for me. All of a sudden I was like, not ready, not ready, not ready, ready. And from that moment, I think I was 38 at the time. And from that moment, it just was what I was going to do. Then I was like, this is it. It's not the way I thought it was going to happen. It's not, what some people call plan A, but it was like, okay, I'm so lucky that I live in a day and age where I can choose a different way to have a family. Yes. And I felt incredibly grateful for that.
I'm just curious, Lesley, what was it about their announcement that you think caused you to say, okay, it's time?
I think that we always have these moments that are like, it just opened something up in me where I was like, it kind of felt in some way like within the scope of my family, it wasn't time. Like I was now single. I was by myself. It wasn't my time. And then all of a sudden there was somebody else having a baby. And I was like, oh, I guess the next generation is starting. And I was like, yeah, this is my time. This is when I'm supposed to do this. And for me, I always knew I wanted to be a parent. It was no surprise to anyone that I was going to have a baby. That was not surprising at all. I don't think I could ever imagine my life without a child. I just knew that that was really important to me. And so once my cousins announced, I think it was kind of like, okay, this is it. Let's make this happen.
That's amazing. So tell us what happened next.
I spent probably the next 6 months starting to work on logistics. And for me, I'm a very organized person. I make a tremendous Excel spreadsheet, and I was now in research phase, and I just kind of jumped in. I started looking at sperm banks. I started figuring out what kind of donor was important to me. I looked at thousands of donor profiles. And that's a very weird process, I have to say, because I'd spent a lot of time online dating. So I understood the notion of a profile, but these are people you're never going to meet. And it was very hard at first for me to discern whether I was choosing someone to date or choosing someone's genetic material. And I had a hard time kind of going back and forth. And actually, I spent one evening with a group of my local Providence friends with a big screen and a projection, putting donor profiles up, and we ate cake and drank wine and read all these things out loud. And ultimately, I spent a night in front of the fire with my best friend on her couch, reading kind of the last 10. Like, here are the 10 that I'm considering. It's very funny. It was uncomfortable for me to choose a donor because you actually have control over things that you might not ever have control over when you are with a partner that you're choosing to reproduce with. Like, I don't know, do I want ears that are medium or large? Like, when you love someone, you don't care if their ears are medium or large. It doesn't matter to you. But when you're choosing a donor, you're like, I don't know, are those SAT scores high enough? And I don't even care about those things. I actually think those things are inadequate measures of a person's smartness. But I started kind of looking and measuring people. It was challenging. And ultimately, what sold me on the donor that I chose is that he was just a mensch. He was a good person. I chose all the genetics. I looked at the medical history, and I was looking for someone who looked the most like me and the most like my family, because I wanted that person to contribute genetic material that would ultimately make my child fit in to the scheme of my family. Not like, oh my goodness, where did you get those freckles? Oh my goodness, where'd that red hair come from? I wanted it to kind of be someone who would contribute a flow. And I also wanted someone who was kind and who was good. We don't know that those things are genetic, but if they are, I kind of want them in the mix. So I feel very, very lucky. The donor I chose, I'm so, so very grateful to him and what he chose to put out in the world so that I could have my fabulous child.
And he is. I've met her child many times, and he is so fabulous. I just want to back up for 1 second, because a lot of people that I see who are approaching this single mothers by choice idea, they start to think about, well, if I'm going to do this, it feels like I'm kind of giving up on that life, right? Like, so I have to kind of say, okay, I'm not now. Now, maybe I'll have a partner in the future, but right now, I am giving up on this life that I thought I was going to have, finding a partner, moving forward, having a life with a partner, having a baby with a partner, being pregnant with a partner, having the childbirth with a partner, all of those things, right, that people imagine when they think about their life with a partner. And then all of a sudden you're saying, I'm not going to do that, right? And we just had someone on the podcast who was a single dad by choice, and he had to go overseas to have his baby, but he also kind of had to kind of struggle with, like, I'm going to do this on my own. And that's like a big choice to make, right? You're kind of deciding I'm going to give this up. And for some people, obviously it's harder than others. But I think, Lesley, what you said to me earlier was it wasn't as hard for you. You kind of were able to kind of move into that role and kind of put that hat on and say, okay, I'm going to do this a little bit differently than I once anticipated. And it wasn't as hard for you to move into that idea.
At the very beginning, as I was starting, I had chosen my donor and I was kind of starting the process. I had a few moments of like complete panic, right? And I actually had a coffee with a dear, dear friend. Actually, it's my former spouse. And we sat together and I said to him, I just don't know. I can't figure out if I'm waving a white flag or if I'm holding like the feminist Medal of Honor. Like it felt like one of those things was happening in my world. And he looked at me and he said, why does that binary feel so dramatic for you? Like, explain that to me, because this isn't a like fork in the road where you choose one instead of the other. Like, this is it's just like you're just keep moving, right? You're just moving forward. And the metaphor that I ended up holding on to was this idea of a patchwork quilt, right? Like, it wasn't linear. My life had been very linear. I'm kind of one of the last of a generation that was able to kind of like very linearly construct my life, from my academic life, the way I chose my career. I had a partner very early. We got married. Like, I had a very linear path. And this disrupted the linearity of that. I just had to reframe it. I needed a new story. And for me, the story was that my life doesn't have to be steps one in front of the other. It's a quilt, and each piece of that quilt builds this beautiful story that I get to have as my own. And so I ended up kind of thinking about my choice to be a single mom as just another square in the quilt. And as soon as I found the story for myself, as soon as I found that narrative, it opened up things for me. And I stopped feeling like this was a white flag giving up moment. And instead, it was just another step in building a life that I knew I wanted.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. I think when you talk about this idea about it being hard, I started to tell you about this before, and I think there's a dominant narrative that becoming a single parent by choice is really hard.
Hmm.
There's kind of, I mean, I hear it now, even with a child who's 12. Like, people are like, how did you do it? Wow, that's amazing. How did you manage? And, even with my friends who are part of dual parent families, if one parent goes out of town, we all rally and we're like, how can we help? Can we bring dinner over? Like, all of a sudden you're by yourself. And there's a story that says that this is you're choosing hard, you're choosing difficult. I mean, I don't want to mislead anyone who's making this decision, because there are definitely times when it's 3 a.m. and you're holding a crying baby, when like it's not easy to do by yourself, no doubt. But for me, it really wasn't hard. I mean, I loved and love the single parent life that I have with Micah, my son. I do. I love this kind of the two of us world that we have. And it's been like that from the very beginning, where it was just kind of like, I signed up for this. This is just what I do. Yeah, I have to unload the dishwasher every day. That's true. There's nobody to help with the dishwasher. And I
Hmm.
do, when I'm on carpool, I got to drive carpool. But that's just the life that I have. It's just how my world has worked. And so for me, there hasn't been anything truly exceptional about this. I know that I'm lucky. I have a support system. I have a wonderful village. And so that's probably made it a lot easier for me. And I don't want to dismiss any of the hardships that come upon people who choose this life, because it is alone. But for me, it worked. It really worked well. I'm really grateful for that.
Although, Lesley, I will say you not only became a single mom, but you started a new life, right? Like, where, lots of people say, well, if you're going to be a single mom, you need to have like huge support system and all of that. And you're from California and you moved to Rhode Island. It's not like you were where you grew up and around all your relatives and your parents. And yes, you have some people that you're close to there, but you had to build this life for yourself in a new place and be a single mom.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in Rhode Island for a while, so I did have a network. I mean, I think
Hmm.
that's very true. And I'm a network person. That's kind of how I work. Like I tend to I have my people around me a lot. I had that when I was single. I had that when I had a baby. I had that when I moved to Rhode Island as part of a young couple. So that definitely helps. But no, my family wasn't here. I certainly didn't have in-laws here. Now one of my sisters lives in Rhode Island. But at the time, until Micah was really like 10, I was solo on the East Coast. People show up. I think this is something that I didn't expect about being a
Mm.
single parent. People showed up for me. I have my neighbor across the street who I was friendly with. And when Micah was born, she just started doing stuff like, "Oh, I see you're coming home from the grocery store with the baby. Do you want me to hold Micah for an hour while you unload the groceries?" And she would kind of scoop
Wow.
him up and take him across the street. And now she's Micah's grandma. I mean, she's definitely a grandparent in every sense of the word. She has a relationship with me and with Micah that is just full of love and family. And
Wow.
that happened. Like that just showed up for me. So I think if you can be open to it and not get too rigid about like, I'm gonna like be the strong person who's choosing this. If you can open up a little bit and say it's okay to let other people in, they'll show up for you in ways that you least expect it.
That's amazing. So, what I'm getting, Leslie, and I think is really good for people to know because, we have our inner dialogue and then we have the world around us, right? And so you're able to kind of say, I'm going to look at my life as this is my choice rather than I feel like, as you said, I'm kind of holding the white flag, I'm giving up on that other life. And I'm forging ahead and building a life for myself kind of in a way that is not only authentic but empowering. Like you really feel like I am deciding that I'm going to move forward, I'm going to do this, and you don't have to stand on a feminist platform to do that. You can just say this is my choice and this is how I'm building my family, and that's really wonderful.
You said that really well. I think I'm really proud of being a single mom by choice.
Mhm.
I feel really proud of that. There's never been a moment that I felt like embarrassed or apologetic about this choice. I feel proud and I feel grateful. I mean, 20 years ago, it would be so hard to do this. And,
Yes.
I mean, I got pregnant 12, 13 years ago. And even in the past 13 years, the supports, things like this. I mean, Lisa, the work that you do, like this is
Thank you.
available for people. These resources are here. And I just think that there's an openness in the world and there's resources and there's technology. I mean, all of these things have created a much more open space for people to make this choice.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. And I hope everybody feels inspired by that because it is absolutely so true.
Hmm.
And if we shift a little bit to Micah, so he's 12 and he's the most fantastic kid. He's
Thank you.
wonderful. How has your perspective with him evolved as being a child of a single mom, as being a donor conceived person, and his understanding and his relationship to himself and, his peers has developed?
That's a great question. I was really lucky that my best friend in the whole world, my best friend since I was 10 years old, works in fertility and is a psychologist. And so I had all of these resources around me in my ear, kind of helping me with things like disclosure and support and all that. So I started practicing the disclosure story about how I was going to tell Micah that he was donor conceived when he was a baby. And I would sit in the rocking chair with him, like, in the middle of the night, and I would practice my story. And I would say, "So, before you were born, I was married, and we decided that we weren't going to be married anymore and we got divorced, but I still knew that it was really important to me to have a family. But it takes three ingredients to have a baby. You need a sperm, and you need an egg, and you need a place to grow it. And I only had two of those ingredients. I had the egg and I had the place to grow it, but I didn't have the sperm. And I was able to go out into the world, and there are places where people choose to donate, to share their sperm so that people can have babies. And I chose a donor. And I would literally sit with this child in my arms, and I would practice, and then I would stop and I'd say, like, wait, I don't want him to think that, like, I was sad because I was divorced. I don't want the story to be that, like, he was the consolation prize. So, like, I would start again and I would tell the story again until I got to the place that, Micah never didn't know that he was donor conceived. He always knew that. He
Wonderful.
always had a story about that. And it's actually quite funny. He would be in preschool and someone would say something about his dad. And he's like, I don't have a dad. I have a donor. Like, he had that word. And I would have to kind of warn his preschool teachers, like, he has this language. He'll tell you the story. Don't feel ever embarrassed to ask him. He's comfortable. And if you need help, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help. Because I knew that in, preschool, early childhood, there would be telling your family story. They would be drawing pictures of their families. They would be doing all of that. I'm still waiting for the, like, genetics unit that's going to come up in 8th grade science. I mean, I knew it's coming. And, so I feel like Micah has a really strong story about being donor conceived. And he asks different questions at different ages, of course. And I've been really trying to answer the questions he has without kind of doing the thing that I so often do, which is just, like, telling everything. And, but when he was 4, he had certain, not questions. He would just say, wait, why don't I have a dad again? Or he's like, so is the person who gave the sperm my dad? And I'm like, no, they're your donor. Like, a dad is a social relationship. Like, you don't have a relationship with this person. Like, he's not your dad, but, like, he's part of the genetic material that you have. So you got things from him. Like, those are your genes. And we would talk about those things. Yeah, I think he's very comfortable. There's awkward moments. And he's a middle school kid in a new school this year. And so there are moments when people are just like, wait, why does your mom always pick up? Where's your dad? Or something like that. And he's just like, yeah, I don't have a dad. And I think he says it like, I don't have a dog. I don't have a sister. Like, it's just not who he is. Like, he has a friend who has a cat. He has another friend who has a guinea pig. He has a friend who has twin sisters. He has another friend who has a brother. Micah's an only child. He doesn't have a sibling. He doesn't have a dad. He's never going to have a dog. Like,
it's just his life. Right.
That's the life he's got. And I think he's able to say that because we've talked about it so much.
Right. And because, as you brought up earlier, and I think that's so important, that you practice enough that you got your kinks out early when he was a baby. So you're not communicating this awkwardness to him. You're not communicating that you're uncomfortable with it. You're not communicating whatever concerns you had or feelings you had about the donor, and everybody has different concerns, or about bringing up a child who's donor conceived. They were all kind of worked through as you were practicing. And so you were able to communicate this just continued love and support and openness in the relationship as he grew up, which is fantastic, Lesley.
Thank you. And,
really,
Lisa, I think this is just kind of a philosophy I have about everything. We get better at things when we practice them.
Yes.
We all do. Right? It doesn't matter. Like, I throw ceramics as part of my hobbies and my love. And the first mugs that I made were terrible. I mean, they were heavy and clunky and awkward. And then the second round came out of the kiln, and I turned to my ceramics professor and I said, wow, my second round of mugs is so much better. And he looked at me and he said, shocking. We just get better when we practice things. And I would say to anyone who's looking to make this decision, just keep practicing. You're going to have a lot of time sitting in the dark, with a baby in your arms. You really, you are. And I think that the more you rehearse, the better you get. And you just, like you said, you work out the kinks. Right? Like, you just get past the point and you start to craft the story that you want to tell, and you want your kid to be able to tell too.
100%. And I think it's so important to emphasize that for everyone out there, because there's so much pressure out there, particularly on social media, that you have to get this perfect, and then you've got to tell your child, at a specific time, and you have to have this perfectly crafted story. And everybody comes to this journey with different feelings and different hurts and different anxieties and different worries about the donor, about their child, and you have to kind of really work through that in the best way you can. And everybody's picture looks different. And I think your picture is so beautiful, Lesley, because you really kind of took that to heart. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
There are so many people out there that struggle and troll the internet trying to find the right ways to build their family. They're looking for a donor or a surrogate or a clinic, and it's so hard to find the right information, particularly when you're stressed. It's hard to think clearly about the decisions that you're going to make. How do I know that? Because I've been there myself, and I've worked at some of the best fertility clinics in the world. And through my experience and seeing thousands of patients, I've learned how to cut through the noise and give patients the answers they need to their most pressing issues. My name is Lisa Schumann. I'm a therapist, a researcher, an author, and I am passionate about helping people find a better journey to parenthood. I created the Center for Family Building to help people understand how to make decisions, not just for the short term, but for a lifetime. We have group counseling, individual counseling, couples counseling, and lots of other services that can help people find the answers that they're looking for. Just take a look at our website so you can see a few of the thousands of people we helped build a better path to parenthood. The decisions you make are too important to leave up to chance. Arm yourself with the right information. Take a look at our website and sign up for a session with one of our therapists, join one of our groups, or access one of our programs, and you will quickly see why our strategies are so effective. Now back to our episode. So as he gets older, and I hear this very often, you brought this up, that people are going to talk about his family at school, right? His family story, family tree, genetics as he gets older.
Mm-hmm.
As you were kind of approaching that with him, were you nervous about that? Because a lot of people say, well, what's going to happen at school if I'm giving my child this openness to tell their story as they see fit? I'm not pushing the narrative anymore because now they have it and they can own it and they can share it how they want. What's going to happen if they tell the world and tell their friends, and are their friends going to make fun of them, or are they going to feel different? And so maybe you can reassure people a little bit about that.
So you may know this about me, just from being my friend, but I just start from the place of thinking the best of other people. And I think that I trust that the people in Micah's life will be able to manage this information. In some ways, that's incredibly generous of me because not everyone can do that.
That's
But
true.
I guess I also trust that Micah has absorbed that same philosophy, that same kind of value that I have, and he can speak from a place of confidence and not defense. I don't think that there's a place that Micah feels defensive about the way that he was conceived or about our family as a family of two. I think he just feels it's very normalized for him. And so it's so normalized that it's like, why would you ask me that? Like, I think he really is at a place of like, yeah, I have a donor. Like, my mom got the sperm somewhere else. Like, she wasn't married. I don't have a dad. I think it's so normalized for him that he is able to manage that conversation, or he'll shut it down if he's not comfortable. He'll just be like, yeah, it's just what it is. And then he'll come home and he'll say, yeah, like so-and-so totally doesn't get it, or something like that. Like, and I'm like, oh, well, maybe over time that person will learn. Maybe you can continue to teach him. He's like, I don't want to talk about it with that person. I'm like, okay, so don't, I think that there's something about that. And again, that's not like, it didn't come naturally to Micah. It didn't come naturally to me. It took practice. We keep talking about it. We keep, having these conversations. So I don't feel worried about those things. I just want to make sure that Micah's never out in the world on his own without the information he needs, right? So when the genetics unit's going to come up in 8th grade science, we'll spend time talking about that beforehand. We'll have that conversation. He hasn't asked a lot about the donor. Every once in a while, he'll say something like, do you think that my donor was athletic? And I'm like, actually, I know a little bit. Do you want to know? And he'll be like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, your donor road crew, or he was a, runner or whatever it is. And I'll be able to say that he's like, oh, do you think that's why I run so fast? And I'm like, it could be. Like sometimes those things are genetic. It certainly didn't come from me. So, and like Micah's body type is very much not like my family's body type. Not at all. Like we are short. We are Russian Jews, we are stocky, we are, like solid. And Micah is very lean. He's very kind of lithe. And he's like, what's that? I'm like, yeah, that's not from my side.
Right.
And joke about that sometimes.
That's cute.
Yeah.
And what about donor siblings? Does he ask about that or?
I've brought it up a few times to just say the donor didn't just give sperm to me. Like the donor had sperm available and other people got it. And I happened to I chose an open ID donor, which was a really explicit choice on my part, meaning that the donor agreed that when Micah turned 18, Micah could reach out. The donor agreed to stay in touch with the sperm bank. And so Micah knows that at 18, he can reach out for more information from the donor himself. And he understands that there are other people who have genetic material that matches him. The word sibling is weird. I don't love the idea that of sibling. I think sibling suggests a social relationship. Like it suggests when you have a sibling, you've kind of grown up with that person. I think he has people out there who have genetic material that matches. And wouldn't it be interesting to see that wow, somebody else has a chin that's exactly like yours. Like that's so interesting. When you stand next to this person, look, your face is the same, or look, that part of your ears, that's where you match. So it might be something that he wants to be a part of, to be a part of the donor sibling registry. Right now, it hasn't piqued his interest, but I continue to bring it up because I'm going to let him kind of drive that train. If he wants to go there, I will absolutely go there with him. It's not that important to me. So I think I would probably pursue it when or if it's important to him.
Yeah, it's very interesting, the whole relationship between siblings and donors. And we've had a sperm donor on this podcast, and he had an adopted daughter who he regards as his daughter, and his offspring he regards as connections to him. They were strangers to him before he met them, and he feels close to them because he's now developed a relationship with them, but he doesn't feel like they're his children. It's a whole different experience, right? And how do you put a name on somebody who you don't have that genetic connection with, or you do have the genetic connection and don't have the social relationship? So it's very confusing. I think still we haven't had time to develop language that really suits that yet. But hopefully over time we will. Just like in adoption, there's this, term birth parents, and there's all different experiences people have with that. But I think it's important that everybody really appreciates that everybody has their own story and their own journey, and there's no right way to go about this. Everybody's personality is different. And I think it's great that you're kind of following Micah's lead and saying, he has the ability to do whatever he wants. If he wants to reach out, if he wants to meet with these people, he can. If he doesn't, that's fine too. But he knows, which is wonderful.
Right. And I would really encourage everyone, I think the process of becoming a parent, a single parent or a parent in a partnership, I think the process of parenting pushes us as adults to have to kind of think about our values in new ways. Right? Because all of a sudden there are people around us who are parroting our words, and they're in the world kind of being the people that they are with us, and we're teaching them how to be. So parenting comes with this very interesting responsibility and opportunity, I would say, to kind of, help your kid find words and find ethical core to speak from. And so for me, I think this would have been the case whether I was parenting solo or not. And perhaps it's even a little easier parenting solo because we're not negotiating between two people's values or two people's sets of language. I think that you just have to find your place and what matters to you. Your place, like anybody's place in choosing this, it might not be the same as mine. For some people, it's just maybe disclosure is more I have an easy time with that. Like telling those stories happens to come easily to me. It's not going to come easily to everyone. So maybe you
Right.
can't do it alone. Maybe you need to have someone to practice with. Maybe you need a trusted friend or a sibling or a colleague or a
Yeah.
therapist who's going to really help you find that story and practice that story. You really have to find the way that feels like this has to be consistent with your own lifestyle, your own world, your own value system. And even if it's not the same as mine, I think that doing that work really is a benefit to both you as a parent, but also to your kid, who then has an easier time managing things in the world as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Absolutely. And what about you, Lesley? I mean, I think the other piece that people worry about, and that I've had many different experiences with over time, is that people do have, and I appreciate that you start from a place of trusting people, but people do have opinions about these things and they like to share them sometimes. Do you ever have those encounters? Have you ever had negative experiences with people making comments to you about being a single mom or about your child not having a dad or about donor conception or asking you intrusive questions about your donor, any of that?
This might sound odd, but no, I
Mm.
haven't. I had from the minute that I said I wanted to get pregnant, my family was like, of course you are. So I'll
Hmm.
start with my family, like everyone, my, 80 something year old grandparents, even my super conservative grandparents who are very traditional Baptists, who really didn't let me sleep in the same room with my partner until we were married. They're gone now. But when I told them that I was going to have a baby by myself, they really, both of them just said, wow, that's just so wonderful. How does that happen? Like they had more
Mm.
questions about the logistics than they had no questions about my choice. Like, of course you're going to have a child. How wonderful for you.
Nice.
I feel very, very lucky that I came from a family that I kind of knew they would support me, but I think the fact that I didn't have to explain, I didn't prepare an explanation to tell my family. I just was like, so I think I'm going to have a baby. And they were like, wow, okay. You doing it in New York? Because, my best friend is there. I'm like, yeah, like I have access to one of the best, centers for reproductive medicine in the country because my best friend is there and I'm going to do it. I'm in. And they're like, great. I think it's fair to say I'm a professor. I work in higher ed. I work in an incredibly social justice based department where we do social justice work. That is the core of like my colleagues and friends at work are incredibly progressive, like by practice, by their choice of career. So I'm in a community that would tend to be more supportive of that.
Hmm.
This is a self-selected group. This is not
Hmm.
a massive sample. I had one colleague who said to me, if you're going to do that, wouldn't it just be easier to like go meet somebody in a bar and just get pregnant? And that's the only time I've had any comment come to me. And I looked at him and he was from a different
Yeah.
generation. He was from a different culture. It seemed baffling to him of why I would medicalize this process. And I was like, no, I think I want to choose a little more than that. I'm good. Right. And, but that was it. One comment. And that's honestly, when I think about that question, that's the only thing I think I can think of that has ever been a question that's been posed to me that's been even remotely negative.
And when you go out into the world, you go on vacation or you go visit other people or you do other things, you never feel like people are going to have these questions like,
No,
where's
but
his
I also
father?
like I said, I'm proud, right? So I wear it like a
Mhm.
medal. So I'm quick to disclose. I mean, I'm a teacher, right? So I have groups of students in front of me all the time. And it's not uncommon by week 2 or 3. I mean, Micah ends up being a lot of my stories. I'm a storyteller as a teacher, as you might guess.
Mhm.
And so, I'm quick to say, I'm a single mom by choice. I chose to have Micah using a sperm donor. So he doesn't have a dad. We're a family of two. And that'll be like an introduction that I say often. And I'll
Really?
tell you what's really inspiring to me. I've had at least one person every semester. I've been teaching for over 20 years. And when I tell the story of Micah in class, I will often get someone, usually a young woman, who will come and say, wow, thank you for saying that. I just have never known anyone who did that before. And it's
Hmm.
really, it's very freeing for them to hear me tell that story and to tell funny stories about my kid, just like anybody would tell funny stories about their kid. And it's like, wow, thank you for sharing that with us. They feel honored to know. And also a little bit kind of like, I never thought of that path before. It's a little bit eye-opening for them.
So you don't get questions about the donor, about your sperm bank, about your choice, about
No,
why you're.
unless they say, could we have coffee? Like, I have some questions. Would you be willing to talk to me about this? I will have people who reach out to me. I mean, I have friends and colleagues who are like, my cousin's babysitters, somebody is thinking
Mhm.
about having a baby by themselves. Would it be okay if I put them in touch with you to talk? And so I've done that many times where people just want to hear my story. Because I think when
Nice.
we don't have any stories of people doing this, it's really hard to imagine for ourselves. Right. And so the more stories that people hear, the more possibility they imagine. And so sometimes people just want to hear me talk about my story like this, right? This is why this
Mhm.
podcast is
Mhm.
important. It just allows
Exactly.
people to hear the stories and be like, oh, that is a possibility, you know?
And this is how you did it, which is so wonderful. So wonderful, Lesley.
Thank you.
Really, really wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, I know that my story isn't necessarily the norm. I mean, I've practiced a lot and I got very lucky. Both of those things are true. So it didn't come without effort that this has been an easy road for me. Like the easy road comes because I worked on the paving all along, right? And some of it's just, it just is. I got the kid who was meant for me. Like Micah was definitely the kid who was meant for me.
Hmm.
And there's a reason that I got this kid. He's an easy kid, but he hasn't been without issues. Like I mean, there are times that are hard. He's a kid who's diagnosed with ADHD. He has some other learning disabilities. He has, it's not been like he's not like the like easy, simple kid, but I was meant to have that kid. I was meant to have a kid who kind of needed those supports from me. So I just hope for everyone who chooses this path that you kind of find a way to make that magic in your family, to make that kind of that synthesis. It's a beautiful thing to be a parent of, a donor conceived child where you have, they're yours, right? Like they're kind of all yours. And
Mhm.
there's something I truly love about that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you've done such a beautiful job, Lesley. Really. I mean, I think that that's, what everybody really needs to hear is that people worry about entering this world. You enter this world and things are going to blow up, or your children are going to be miserable, or people are going to treat you poorly, whatever. What I think you're saying, Lesley, is you're paving the path. Like you've been really thoughtful about how can
Mhm.
I practice my story so it's better for him? How can I decide how I'm going to talk to other people and get comfortable with that in my own skin and help him as a result get comfortable in his skin, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that paving the path is such a wonderful, wonderful message for people to understand that it's possible, right? We all think there's this mysterious black box out there and we're going to jump into it and it's going to be really scary and horrible things are going to happen there. But it is possible to pave this path in a way that we decide we want to pave it, right? We want to
Yeah.
embrace single parenthood. We can embrace single parenthood and just take all the right moves to try to ensure that we're going to feel comfortable and then our child's going to feel comfortable. And that's the best we can do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's about, paving the path is about like, finding the resources that you need and making
Hmm.
sure that you kind of you seek them out and put them in place. So a lot of people ask me like, "Ooh, how do you like raise a kid on a single income?" And that's hard sometimes, right? I mean, the more
Yeah,
financial resources you have, the things are always easier when you have more
of
financial
course. Yes.
resources. And I'm a single parent on one income, and we just make it work. Like it's hard, and I've ended up without financial resources. I've ended up having to seek out like human resources about like making sure that like my people are in place, or that I find like I live in a community where I can find a lot of when Micah was a baby, we did so many like free classes and things at the library, and open session at a gym, and we actually found a lot of resources that weren't expensive. And it depends where you live, right? Like I live in a city
Mm-hmm.
that is a pretty easy place to raise a kid. I'm in Providence, Rhode Island. Like that is not, it's quite easy to live here with a child. But I think that like when you're not a parent, you don't know about these things. I mean, you don't know that there's story hour at the public library every Tuesday morning. And then all of a sudden
Mm-hmm.
you do. And then once you know that, you notice like, oh, I never even noticed these flyers at the coffee shop. And there's all these flyers about things that people are doing. And I think that, building those resources is definitely about a part of paving that path.
Well, that's fantastic, Lesley. I think it's so helpful to really absorb that because people really need to embrace this story. And as you said earlier, it doesn't have to be about either extreme, either rejecting what you may have once wanted or standing on this pedestal of, kind of trying to push this fiery path ahead. You really can just say, this is where I am and accept that and try to do everything that you can to make that work. And you've done a beautiful job, Lesley.
Thank you so much.
Really,
Thank you.
really.
And thank you for making this resource available to people. I hope that people will, go to your website and listen to the podcast and read your books. And I think that there's something about, there is some effort that goes into choosing parenthood. And that's whether you're choosing parenthood by yourself or with a partner. These things it's new and new things are hard. But I think that kind of reminding yourself that you can do hard things and that you just have to keep kind of getting yourself ready and ready and ready. I think that those resources and knowing that we live in a time when they're available is just a remarkable blessing.
Well, you are certainly contributing to that today, Lesley. So I really appreciate it because it is hard for people. And the modern family is not a place where a lot of people want to be and feel very nervous about getting there. And so it really is helpful. And that is my goal, to try to help people have a better path to parenthood, because it doesn't have to be as scary or feel as alone as many people feel. So thank you
Absolutely.
for coming today and
Thank you.
providing all this great information. I hope everyone out there is listening to Lesley. And Lesley, are you on social media, or do you have any way that people can reach you if they have questions?
I'm not really on social media other than like
Hmm.
sometimes I put my ceramics up on social media. But
Okay.
if people do have questions, I'm always open to conversation. I think that the more people you can talk to before you kind of jump in this pool, the better. So if people want to contact me, please reach out to Lisa. And Lisa, you can get them in touch with me. I'm always happy to share my story and have a conversation.
Terrific. I'd be happy to. Well, thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And for all of you out there, please press subscribe before you get off this podcast, because it's how we keep going. And thank you so much for coming. I hope you got something out of this episode. It was really great for me to see Lesley and share all of this with you. And I hope it helps you feel empowered and feel good about the choices that you make, because you can do it. So thanks, and I will see you next time. Hi, it's Lisa Schumann. I hope that you enjoyed that video, and I hope it helped you. And if it did, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe, because that's how we keep going. It's really important to us. And if you liked it, you might like this one.